Have you been interested in Final Girl Series 2 but you're not sure where to start? Well, you've come to the right place. In this video, I'm going to give you an overview of the 5 feature films that are part of Final Girl Series 2, giving you a general overview of how they play, pointing out the special mechanics of each location and killer, and hopefully by the end of this video, helping you decide which one you might want to start with and what order you might want to purchase them, depending on which one's the right fit for you. Now, before we start talking about the actual Series 2 Final Girl, let me do a quick disclaimer here. You do need the core box of Final Girl. Regardless if you're playing Series 1 or Series 2, you need one core box to play any of the feature films. Alright, with that obligatory core box explanation out of the way, let's go ahead and start talking about the Big Bad Wolf. So here we are with the first feature film we're going to talk about, Once Upon a Full Moon, and this is starring the Big Bad Wolf as the killer, and then Storybook Woods as the featured location. And so one quick thing I want to point out is the actual designer of this, Julie Ahern, is different from the kind of Series 1 designers. Those were pretty much done by Evan Derrick and AJ Porfirio. And I think that's an interesting take on Final Girl, where you have a nice core system and having other folks with different kind of takes on it come in and do it. And I think it was done to good success, as we'll see in the Big Bad Wolf set here. So let's take a look at Storybook Woods here. First thing you might notice about this map is it is quite a bit smaller than a lot of the other feature film locations, with a total of just 13 spaces here. Your typical one usually has 18 to 20. So it feels easier to get around, but also a bit more claustrophobic because the killer will also have less spaces, right, to get to you. The kind of special rule for this location here is you're going to notice there's a couple of bridges. There's kind of this peninsula in the center of the map and then this kind of perimeter around it. And there's 3 bridges here, and the trick to those bridges is that only one victim can follow you across that bridge. So if you're trying to get folks out of the center or travel through the center with victims, it's going to be quite a bit longer. You might have to go the long way around the entire map to get to an exit. And so quite a bit smaller, but there are some limitations on the actual movement you can do on the map. The other thing I want to highlight is the actual vehicle included in here, that kind of mechanic. And the one in Storybook Woods is going to be the raft. So along the river here, you'll notice there's a couple of these different green spaces that have this little raft icon. And so when you draw that event card, you set up a couple of different docks on the river, and then you're actually able to sail the raft back and forth. So that creates another kind of mobility opportunity on the map. Again, getting around some of those difficulties the bridges might pose. I tend to like smaller maps where it feels a little more claustrophobic with the killer, and so the Storybook Woods really hit well for me. Pretty straightforward. I think this is a good step up from something like Camp Happy Trails. This is like a good beginner 2.0 type location. That's Storybook Woods. Let's look at our killer for the set, which is the Big Bad Wolf. Very iconic storybook villain. I think it's translated really quite well in this game. And so to explain him properly, I just have to grab his setup cards here. So we're going to see his dark power here, and then we'll just pick any of his finale cards. And because the big thing you're going to notice on the Big Bad Wolf is that there's going to be 2 different icons. There's going to be this little crosshair icon and then this skull icon. And so in the beginning of the game, he's going to be in tracking mode, right? He's kind of like sniffing you down, trying to find you. And then later on in the game, he's going to go into the skull mode, which is the killing slay mode. And what that's going to change is a number of his terror cards are going to have 2 locations. They're going to have a top kind of tracking mode, and then the action if he's in the hunting slay mode. And so in the beginning of the game, you'll notice a lot of the tracking actions are not going to be directly hurting you. They're going to be pumping up the bloodlust. They're going to be kind of going after you, getting into your location. And you'll notice the main difference between the slay and the tracking ones is this is when he's going to start moving towards you and attacking you, actually doing damage. And so I find this set is actually quite a bit friendlier if you struggle with difficulty in this game, because there's kind of like a built-in ramp to his kind of killer setup, where he is going to be starting off just kind of chasing you and then killing you. So you have time to rescue your victims, to get some of your items out, to really prepare, buy some of those combat cards that you might need to face them. And I think it's a beautiful way to balance out the difficulty in this game if that's something you struggle with. That's pretty much the main hook of him. He's pretty much a standard killer outside of that. The only thing is, once you reveal his dark power, you'll see the mode here is tracking mode. When you reveal his dark power, in addition to what happens, he's going to say mode, and then it goes into slay mode, and that's when you start to resolve the different action, and each tarot card you'll resolve that action instead. And then you could see when he goes into his final, reveal the final killer card here, his action will not have either of them, right? Because he's going to be in slay mode at the end of that. So really, really good killer. I think to me, this is the perfect step-up killer from Hans. He's pretty friendly, beginner friendly, not friendly, it's a very mean killer wolf. The wolf hunting you is translated really well with this killer, and really, really solid feature film. Quick look at our final girls included in this set. We have Red, of course, for Little Red Riding Hood, and Gretel of Hansel and Gretel fame. I really like both of these. I think Red is my favorite out of the two. You can see her signature ability is having the chance to move one free space towards a killer that's within 2 spaces of you. So you really get that feeling like you're hunting down this wolf or any other killer. I really, really like Red. Gretel, I haven't found a good way to play yet. So she's able to convert one of the failure dice to a success by discarding 3 action cards. And that one's tricky. You know, discarding 3 action cards is a pretty hefty price, but if you're in a real pinch, having that as a backup sure success is nice. But Red is definitely my favorite out of the 2 in this set.
While I was recording one of the segments, I heard some howling and scratching coming out of near my front door. I came to hide in the closet. But in case things go poorly, I ask you guys, if you're enjoying the video, to like and subscribe for more board game and Final Girl content. I would really appreciate it, especially if a wolf ends up ripping me up right now. I would really appreciate it as my last request. So, but I don't hear anything, so I think it should be okay to go. Oh, God!
Up next, we have a knock at the door, and this is going to be your home invasion. Think The Strangers, Hush, When a Stranger Calls, that type of horror movie. And the location we're going to be playing in is the Wingard Cottage, and the killers are going to be the Intruders. So let's take a look at Wingard Cottage first. So it's going to be broken up into the number of different rooms in the actual cottage and then the surrounding locations. And you're also going to notice there's a couple of different icons on this map. So let me pull out a couple of the setup cards just to give you an overview of the new mechanic added in this location, which is the crafting system. So at the beginning of the game, you're going to set aside the 4 different supply items that you're able to pick up. And so you're going to notice on the map there's a couple of different locations with these little icons. There's the tools, there's the spare wood, there's the nails up here, there's some rope over here, and you're going to be able to, when you're in one of those locations, spend 1 time and then pick one of these cards up and put it in your inventory. And the reason you're going to want to collect those is because at the start of the game you're going to set up 4 of these crafted items, and they can kind of work one of 2 ways. You can either combine items that are in the Wingard Cottage set. For example, to create the spear, you need the knife item, the wood, and then you can spend 2 time, and you can do that in any location. If you have those items, you can spend the requisite time and then add this to your inventory. There's also some other different items that don't require any other items other than the supply items. So if we take a look at the nail trap here, you need the wood, the nails, and the discarded tools, and then spend 2 time. And so you actually just need to collect those supply items, then you can create something like the nail trap. Is sometimes the item decks that you set out in these different locations, sometimes there's not a weapon or there's an item that you're really like struggling to get. And these crafted items really create a cool, different way to create weapons, to create traps, to create defensive items that even if you're not able to find them digging through the item decks, you're able to do it yourself by getting these supply items. And I think that's a really, really smart way to introduce crafting. I don't think it's too complicated to do. You're just spending the time. There's not a lot of like additional rules that you need to be in a certain location to craft items. You just have to go to these locations to actually get the supply items. So I think that solves one of the kind of difficulties in the game. Aside from the crafting, I really love this map. The closest thing we kind of had to a house, I think, is the Creech Manor from Series 1, but that never felt like a residential home. You know, it's kind of like a haunted mansion. Here, the cottage, it just has a certain feel to it where you can kind of hold up in this cottage here and you feel like the killers are surrounding you around the outside of the house, and you can set up traps because they have to come through the house certain ways. And it's just a really, really cool cottage, kind of house feel to it. And this be my favorite map. I like the crafting system, and I really just love this setting, this kind of lakeside cabin. It's a really, really nice, very versatile to a lot of the killers, and big love for the Wingard Cottage. The Wingard Cottage is also home to one of my favorite event cards in the game, the Home Security card. And so what that does is that you can play this or activate it on your turn if there's no killers in the house. and if any killer tries to enter the house, they're not able to. You put one of these tokens on the home security system, and after they try to enter 3 times, then it's discarded. But it's a cool way to lock down the house and give you some time to set up traps, and it really has a nice feeling to it of like that home defense. You're in here, they're out there, and you got to get ready before they break in. Really, really cool event card. Before we move on to the killer, let me quickly shout out the vehicle for this location, which is the kick scooter, and this lets you move 2 spaces for free in the outdoor area. So you can't run the scooter inside the house, but it is an easier way to get out around the house. All right, let's talk about the intruders. So here we are with the intruders, and they do work a little bit differently than your standard killer because there's 3 of them. And I thought it'd be easier just to do a little half setup here just to help you guys understand how does the game work when you have 3 active killers, right? That can sound pretty terrifying. So at the start of the game, you're going to set it up as normal, and all 3 killers are going to start in whatever their respected starting place is. However, you're going to notice on the killer board here, there's this little K where you're going to put it on whichever killer is active. So at the start of the game, the red killer, which is Trish here, is going to be the starting killer. And their terror cards are going to sometimes instruct you to change who the active killer is. So here, let's look at this one, for example. You're going to resolve this action, right? Move towards a victim, attack a victim, and that's going to be your active killer. So Trish would do that, for example. Then you resolve the next line, which is move who the active killer is down 1. So you slide your token down. Now the baghead is your active killer, and then you're going to resolve the same action, move towards victim, attack victim. Now, on subsequent turns, the baghead is your active killer. And you can see these cards play with it in a number of different ways. Sometimes you're changing the active killer multiple times. Here, they will hunt you down. You're going to be moving, the active one is going to be attacking you. Then the other 2 are going to be moving towards you, kind of encircling you. But every turn, every killer isn't necessarily going to be moving. If you don't have a terror card that changes the killer, it's just going to resolve the action and then, do things as normal. So there's a couple of different ways that the active killer can change. I already show you one of them with the little terror card arrow there. The other way they can change is that if you attack a killer, they automatically will become the active killer. So you'll immediately move this icon over to whoever you had just attacked, right? You're kind of drawing that attention. The other way it can change is that if you kill one of these killers, you will slide it to the most top available one. So for example, let's say Baghead is the active killer. You kill him, this icon will go over to Trish, and so on and so forth. So these are all going to have their own health pool, so they're all going to have 6 health, which is 18 health, which is quite a bit, but you're able to chip away at each of them individually. They're also all going to have their own final health token, so you'll, in a similar game, right, you're going to reveal the final health, see if they're going to be really dead or come back to health with a certain amount of life. But I think this is a good balance of changing it up with 3 killers, but I don't think it's so overwhelming where it's so difficult you feel like you're getting attacked 3 times every round. That certainly can happen, but I think it's handled very tactfully to bump it up to 3 killers without making it feel too overwhelming. And I find that they work really, really well, right? This kind of like idea where they can be encircling the house. So I think the intruders are an interesting killer. I like them, and I think that having to manage 3 killers is handled very well and pretty smooth. Let's also take a quick look at our final girls before we put this one away. So we have Ava here. Her signature ability is when making a horror roll, you may re-roll all 1 results. That's good. Re-rolling is always lucky to, you have the chance to be lucky if you get a better result. But I think Ginny is the standout of this set. And so she's able to choose 2 of these different actions to have like a bonus result. And these are all the basic actions. So your walk, short rest, weak attack, and focus. And I think it's a cool way to revitalize some of those level 0, basic level 0 cards that you're always going to have in your hand anyway, and having a way to bump them up to be more useful is a really cool mechanic. So Ginny is very fun to play with, very cool interaction with the cards, and she changes it up quite a bit. Those are the Intruders and Wingard Cottage. Let's keep moving. Up next, we have Madness in the Dark, which is going to feature the Ratchet Lady as our killer, and then the Wolfe Asylum as our location. And this is designed by the OGs, Evan Derrick and AJ Porfirio from Series 1. And let's go ahead and start with the Wolfe Asylum. So here we are with the unique components for the Wolfe Asylum, and the big thing that probably is going to jump out to you are these big multicolored, and so these are questionable medication pills that you can pick up in your time at the Wolfe Asylum. And so the way these are going to be integrated into the map is that setup cards are going to have a new symbol on them, these little pill locations. So you're going to, at the start of the game, you would take all these pills and then you're going to place one at random at each of these locations. So you would put one here, you put one in the center here, you put one up here, and then you put one down here. So there was always going to be 4 at the beginning of a game here, and then you also take 1 as like your starting one at the beginning of the game. So you're always going to start with 1, 4 will be out on the map, and then 5 will kind of be on the pool here, and there'll be different events and cards and such that can add additional pills to the map, or you can pick up pills from the pool. You know, things will happen as the game progresses in the Wolfe Asylum. And so why do you want these? There's going to be a couple of different pill effects depending on the combination that you have. So if you take a single pill, you know, they're kind of minor effects: heal, move a space, reduce horror. If you mix combinations of 2 colors, you're able to recover health, get a lot more time, and reduce the horror quite a bit. And then the final one is going to be the one of each color, which is going to let you get an amped card. And these amped cards are honestly kind of funny. They're like game-breakingly good. So Final Girl 2.0 is probably my favorite here, where you're able to reveal your ultimate ability and then take a second Final Girl of your choice and apply its ultimate ability. It's so crazy, and I love the Final Girl 2.0 card. The rest of these also hold their own. Furious Strike is free, ignoring dark powers, getting an extra roll, an extra dice for all your rolls is incredible. Being able to heal for free, you know, these are free rapid healing, really good. But the Final Girl 2.0 is so fun. I love the idea that you call in another Final Girl to come help you beat this killer. And the way you're going to pick up these pills is that when you stop in a location, you can spend 1 time to take the pill, and then you reveal it and see what it is. But it's not all upside, right? There's going to be downsides to taking these pills, and you can see if you take a single pill, there's going to be no side effects, and then if you take 2 or more, there's going to be a different amount of side effects that you're going to pick up. And these side effect cards are going to be, you know, variously bad things to happen. You can see this one will make you discard a random item card. This one will have no effect, so sometimes you get lucky with the pill you take and nothing happens. This one resets the side effect deck. This one, paralyzation, discard all action cards that allow movement. So, you know, these aren't like gonna ruin you necessarily, but they're not great. And you can see there's a good amount of normal cards. So the game really is encouraging you to take your risk with these pills because the payoff is really, really strong. But I think the pills are a cool, randomized, interesting way to add some variety. And honestly, it makes it a little bit easier. I can see if you're fighting a easier killer on this map, I think the pills will kind of smooth out the difficulty of killing it, but really fun. I think it's a really, really fun mechanic, the pills. I think works well in the kind of abandoned asylum setting that is here, and I really like them. They're a cool addition. Just to highlight one of the items real quick, this is an example of an item in this set. So you can see immediately discard, take 2 pill tokens. So you would take those from the bank of the leftover pills. The vehicle for this location is the hospital gurney that we have here. It's honestly a pretty hilarious item here. So you're able to place 2 victims on it. So in theory, you could move around with up to 4 victims, 2 on the gurney and the 2 base that you're able to carry. You're able to discard the gurney to ram it into an enemy, inflict damage, 1 damage, and then 1 additional damage for each victim on the gurney. The victims are then killed. So the idea that you can load this up with people and then just ram it into the killers is pretty awful, but pretty hilarious at the same time. So those are the pills. This is the Wolfe Asylum. Let's move over to the Ratchet Lady. So here we have the killer of the set, the Ratchet Lady. And for me personally, this is the killer out of the entire Series 2 that I had the hardest time getting at least 1 victory against until I really adjusted my play to face her. So the one thing you're gonna notice is that, wow, she only has 6 health, that's pretty easy. This asterisk, and it's gonna say the Ratchet Lady has no upper health value. And so there's a lot of different ways for her to heal damage and buff her health, and it can get out of control if you're not keeping kind of track of how strong she's getting. It's really going to change the way that you play. If you're a person like me and you like to take your time, you like to search the item decks, you play a little more defensively, the Ratchet Lady will not let you do that. She will scale way faster than you will, and by the time her finale card is introduced, you know, you're done if you haven't been chipping away at her and keeping that under control. So really, it challenges the way you play the game. The other special thing she has are the Maniacs, and these are like these look like red victims, which is kind of what they are. So at the start of the game, she's going to spawn with 2 maniacs on her, and there'll be different terror cards and other things that will spawn additional maniacs. But you can see on the card here, the maniacs actually don't attack you. They're going to move 1 space towards you. They have a movement of 1, but they will not attack you. The way they can do damage to you is that if you're in a space with a maniac, there is more than 1, you take damage for every additional maniac. If there's 2 maniacs, you're going to take 1 damage. If you move out of that space, 3 maniacs, you take 2 damage, and so on. However, this also introduces a new action card when you play with the Ratchet Lady, and that's the Calm card. And you can see that's a way that you can convert the maniacs into victims, or you can screw it up and increase your bloodlust level. But it is nice to have a way that you can convert these guys to deal with them. You can also just attack them without penalty if you just want to kill them and get them off the board. But there is a way to unlock some more victims if you have these Calm cards, which is nice. You can see she has a pretty short terror track here, so this finale will get introduced pretty quickly. See, her terror cards have a lot about healing her. You know, recovers 2 health. There's a lot of different abilities here that are gonna let her heal. A couple of different cards that will have the maniacs start to move and attack you. If you're like me and you play the game slowly, this will teach you a little bit more of how to play at a good tempo and get items just ride the line of just what you need to win without going overboard and over preparing and then burning too much time. I think the Ratchet Lady really challenges you to do that. Very challenging, but cool killer. The kind of infinite scaling health is really interesting, and she's really tough, but fun killer to play against. Let's take a look at our 2 final girls. We have Heather and Veronica with the Wolfe Asylum. And for Heather, her ultimate ability is going to be for each 5 or 6 on your initial horror roll, you may re-roll 1 other die. Add an attack to your attack for each success in the final result. It's a nice passive way to do damage. I don't believe this isn't tied, a horror roll is any kind of ability check you're doing, so this is a nice way to do some free damage with Heather. So a nice way to augment some of your other horror rolls, which is cool. And then Veronica is kind of cool too. For the rest of the game, you reset time to 7 at the end of your planning phase, 6 if playing on extreme horror mode. And so again, some nice passive income to reset that to 7. Again, this is a nice buffer if you're kind of riding the line at 0 time to be able to do a failure and burn more time, which is nice. So both Veronica and Heather, both solid final girls. I'd like both of them. They both have interesting abilities. So let's say goodbye to the Wolfe Asylum and the Ratchet Lady and move on to our next feature film. It's time to head into the void and face the Evomorph on the USS Konrad in this evolving alien threat designed by Evan Derrick. And let's go ahead and start by looking at the USS Konrad location. Come take a step aboard the USS Konrad as we take a look at the special setup and items that you're going to need to survive on the spaceship. So the first big thing is going to be these key cards. You're going to see them all over the map. So to begin the game, you're going to start with 1 key card with a key card token, and you're going to have 2 empty key cards with you at the start of the game. And then the other 3 remaining key cards that you'll see here, these get shuffled into the item deck at the beginning of the game. In addition, on the setup card, you're going to notice that there's these key card tokens. So you're going to put them on the map where you're instructed to put them. And you're going to need those tokens to fill up your empty key cards. So you're going to have 1 active one, but to actually activate the other 2, you're going to have to either start or end your turn, and then for 1 time you can pick up one of these tokens and put it on your key card so they're active. And these key cards are going to be critical to surviving on this map. So one way you're going to be able to use these key cards is you're going to notice that in addition to your normal movement routes on the ship here, there's these kind of yellow-greenish maintenance shafts. And those are going to be cool shortcuts to both get around the killer, and also killers can never move through the maintenance shaft. So it's a nice way for you to kind of sneakily get around the ship. And the way you're going to do that is that if you're in a space that's attached to the maintenance shaft, you can take a token from your key card off and put it onto the board, and that activates this maintenance shaft. And does not cost any time to place the token onto the board, so that's a nice way to, again, add some more mobility around the map. Now, the more exciting use of the key cards are these different maintenance cards, and there's 3 different in the game, and they're all going to have really cool effects around the ship. So you can see they're going to have a space that they can be activated on. So this one you have to be on the trash compactor space, which is right up here. And if you're on that space, you can put a key card here, and then whenever an enemy or victim ends its movement on the trash compactor, inflict 1 damage. This does not affect you or victims following you. So again, cool way to do extra damage. The incinerator, you would need 2 key cards to activate this ability. And then whenever an enemy or victim enters the furnace, roll a die and then do the following. And then again, does not affect you. So it's a cool way to set up traps and bait the killer. So this is probably the most dramatic key card usage, and that's that classic, the only way to kill it is by blowing up the whole ship. And so you need 4 key cards to activate this. And then once activated, you put the little radiation token here, and then you count down for the next 2 turns until it gets to the explosion. And when the explosion goes off, the ship self-destructs, killing everything. If you are not at an exit space, you lose the game. And so the exit space on here are 3 escape pods in the corner here. So if you're not on one of those, when the ship explodes, you're dead appropriately. But a cool way to kill the killer, if you really don't care about surviving, you can get rid of it that way. So the last maintenance card here is the airlock, which is activated at the hangar, which is kind of on the left side here where our superloader is hanging out. So the airlock is a little unique, and so you're able to use these key cards and then set up the airlock, and then whenever you discard the little airlock token, you instantly kill everyone in the hangar, and the superloader is lost if it's there. So right, you're sucking everything out of the airlock. If the killer dies, you still reveal their final health token. If it comes back to life, place them at the junction as they manage to grab onto the ship and crawl back inside. So really cool flavor there of trying to eject something into space, it still survives and it claws its way back onto the ship. If you are in the hangar when the airlock is open, roll a die. 5 or 6, you manage to survive. Otherwise, you lose the game. Do not flip over your final health token. So right, that dramatic hanging onto a piece of rope as the airlock opens and trying to get the killer out. Really, really cool. The airlock is kind of not as dramatic as the self-destruct, but still a risky way to try to get rid of the killer. Finally, you can't have an alien-inspired spaceship without the superloader. And so this is a vehicle that's always going to be in place. The card itself is in play. However, you need to get the superloader key, which will then allow you to actually activate it and ride around in it. So you can see it gives you 2 free attack here. It takes up both your hand slots, and it has a couple of limitations, right? Victims won't follow you, your movement is reduced, you can't heal yourself or rest. So it does have some risk to getting in the superloader. So if you're getting into it, you kind of got to be sure that that's your plan to try to get rid of the killer. And that touches on my favorite part of the Konrad here. And I think that it introduces a lot of interesting, unique ways to deal with the killer. Either you want to go by self-destruct or the airlock, or lead it into the furnace, or get into the superloader. This is a very interesting, dynamic map, and it introduces a lot of different ways to play rather than just, hey, let's get a weapon and start whacking on the killer. There's a lot of interesting ways that you can approach the problems on this map. And the escape, the maintenance shafts give cool mobility options as well. So overall, I think it's a really interesting location we have here. So our next killer here is iconic, the alien, the xenomorph, the evomorph as it's called here. So there's a bit to it, but I think that it does a good job at adapting this iconic killer. So first, let's look at the evolution track, which is pretty critical to this character. So it's going to have 3 different stages it's going to go through as you play the game. It's going to start as a hatchling, it'll go to a youngling, and then finally be an adult. So at the start, it's going to be a hatchling. So you can see there's some special rules on each of the settings, and it'll kind of tell you what to do. So here for the hatchling, only increase the bloodlust if the hatchling kills a victim. If bloodlust would increase otherwise, instead you lose time. Hatchling is pretty gnarly here. It only moves 1, but it does 10 damage. So if you get caught in the wrong space, this little thing will burrow inside your chest and just kill you essentially in one blow. That's a tough damage to get over. But if you're able to cheese it and kind of kill it, it only has 4 health at the very beginning. The other thing you're going to notice is on the terror track here, it's pretty long. It's going to have this keyword that's new to the Evomorph, which is the evolve keyword. So you're going to start as a hatchling. Assuming it gets at least 1 kill, you're going to move your terror track up to the first space, which has an evolve, and that's when it's going to become a youngling, which is the second stage. So the other thing you're going to notice is that we have a second deck for the killer cards here. So you have your terror cards like any other person, any other killer, and you're also going to have this ambush deck here. So you'll see on the evolution card, it'll instruct you when you go to the youngling stage, upon evolving, vanish. And that little icon there is the vanish icon that you'll see in a couple of these different cards. Bloodlust now increases normally. So let's say you get to the youngling stage. What happens then is that you put the miniature or your killer meeple on top of the terror deck. So at that moment, in every killer phase, once it's vanished, you are not drawing killer terror cards like normal. You're drawing from the ambush deck. And the ambush deck is going to have a couple of different abilities that are different from terror cards. So you can see if it's a youngling, you're going to do the top, and then when it becomes an adult, you flip the deck over and it's going to have the adult. And you know, it kind of goes a little easier on the youngling, and then once an adult is when it's kind of in full predator mode and going after you. So you can see some of them are a little bit benign here. Quick editing note, but you'll also notice that there is a number on the top of the ambush card, and that is the kind of danger value of that ambush card. So it ranges from 1 to 10, and so as you're going through the ambush deck, you can kind of anticipate if there's still a very bad effect coming, or if you have kind of gone through the worst of it. So something to help you kind of gauge how much risk you are while you're running through that ambush deck. So here, youngling, increase the horror level, and then increase the blood level. Pretty normal, easy stuff. This one, increase the horror level, and then move the bloodlust marker up to the next space with an evolve in the special column effect. So that would immediately move your bloodlust level all the way up to the next evolve, making an adult. You can see there's a couple of number of different events, but most of the youngling ones evolve, or revolve rather, around getting the bloodlust up to the next adult level. This one's kind of interesting here. Move the bloodlust marker up to the track on the next space of the evolve, and then move and attack the final girl. So the other interesting thing is the actual way it's going to reappear. So the other new card in this is the scan. And so when you're playing with the Xenomorph, you're going to have a couple of these different tokens that have these little X marks on them. And so the idea is that it's going to jump out of the shadows and ambush you, and the scan card is a way to get around that. And so you're able to put these X's, for example, if you get 2 successes, place an X in your space and then the horror level goes down. And so you can put an X on your space so that when the killer appears, it is not allowed to appear on that space, so essentially protecting you. You know, if we used that card we just looked at as an example here, when it comes out and attacks, normally if you did not scan, it would pop out at your location and immediately attack you. However, if you did do the scan, it wouldn't be able to spawn on your location. It would have to go to a victim or something like that. But again, it's good protection. And you can see this is unique where it has a 3 success icon. Place the Xenomorph in your space, skip the next killer phase, remove this card from the game. So that's essentially you know, scanning well enough to actually locate it directly, and you're kind of ambushing it, which is really cool. I like that spin, and you can see there's 3 scan cards in the game. So once you get to the adult level, you're going to move this up here, and then the adult kind of functions more as a normal killer, I would say, where you're going to have, from the 4 health you have as a hatchling and youngling, it's going to go to its full 10 health, then it recovers all of its health, and then you reveal the dark power and rotate the ambush deck. So that's, again, dark power, of course, is our lower card, and then the ambush deck is going to flip over to the adult side, and you can see these are just a little bit harsher here. Place the Evomorph in the closest space to you without an X and remove all X's. So again, that's playing with that scanning mechanic, because the adult is going to be popping in and out of the shadows. There's different terror cards that will cause it to vanish, and then you're going to be drawing out of this deck. If you do finish the ambush deck, you reshuffle it. It's not like running out of the terror deck where you resolve the finale card. You can keep going through the finale deck. And just to give you guys a quick look at the terror cards for this killer, you can see a number of them will result in it vanishing. And so that kind of, I didn't mention this during the setup, but when you do set up the terror card for the Evomorph, you actually only have 8 cards in the terror deck. You still mix them together, but instead of drawing 10 like a normal game, you draw 8 of them. And so it's a way to balance out. You can be in this vanish ambush phase for quite a bit, so it's going to take a little bit longer typically for the Evomorph to get to its finale, but again, less terror cards kind of balance that out. Again, this is a big undertaking, right? It's a lot of people love the Xenomorph, they love the alien, with this is, you know, an unapologetic kind of homage to, and I think that the balance of the evolving with the ambushing and coming out of the shadows, it feels like you're being stalked and hunted. You're able to fight it with the scanning. I think it's a really, really good adaptation of this, and I think it's a challenge, but I think they kind of knocked it out of the park. This has been one of my favorite killers to mix and match. Just that stalking, hunting dynamic it has is really, really fun. it's a solid killer, and I think they did a good job adapting it. Let's take a quick look at our final girls here. Are definitely Ellen Ripley and our Jeanette. So this is kind of an Aliens 1, Aliens 2 homages, which is really cool. And they both have pretty solid abilities. So Ellen's is when successfully resolving a search action, you may choose to freely look through all the location's unused item cards instead of this space's items deck. So, you know, when you set up the game, right, you're setting up kind of separate item cards. So all the ones that aren't in the game, you're able to search through with Ellen. So that's really powerful. That's also cool if you aren't able to find the super loader key. This is a nice way to cheese it out from it not being in the game. She has a way to get around that, which is cool, but generally helpful in any map. Jeanette is a little more combat focused. So you are considered to have an additional hand for the purposes of holding and using item cards. Then place 2 tracking markers on this card. When using an item with limited uses, you may use one of these markers instead. And so this essentially is new uses on something like a weapon with charges, the slingshot, guns, different armors. You're able to take tokens off of her, and I love this ability. It's really fun. Having an extra hand slot is really useful to have, and having extra charges is fun. It's always fun to have more uses on items. So I like both of these final girls. I think they complement the Xenomorph, the Evomorph very well. And I think that the overall Into the Void package is a really, really solid combination of the location and the killer, and a great kind of homage and honor to the Xenomorph Alien franchise that they were going for. And I think they kind of knocked it out of the park. Last and certainly not least, we have the final Panic at Station 2891 feature film. And so this is going to feature the Organism as the killer, and then Station 2891 as the location. And as you could probably guess, this is an homage to the classic John Carpenter's The Thing, with your kind of mimicking enemy and being out stranded in a frozen wasteland. So this is a really cool set. This is probably the most complex set, as we'll see in a moment. So let's go ahead and get started by looking at Station 2891. So here we are with the location for this feature film, Station 2891, our Arctic Research Laboratory. So you can see it's pretty much broken up into 2 halves here, the top here being our indoor section, the lab, and then the bottom section being the kind of outdoor with 2 item locations here. So this one's really interesting. It kind of almost fundamentally changes how you play the game. And that primarily is coming from what you might notice is there's only 1 exit location on this board. So you're going to notice that in addition to the helicopter spot, there's this helicopter card. And so when you have 1 to 3 victims, as a free action, you can move the helicopter along with however many victims are on that space to this little helicopter card. So it has to deliver people to the Arctic airport to actually count them as being saved. And the way you're going to move that helicopter is that there's a new action card in this set, the Fly Faster. So you can move it 2 spaces, 1 spaces. So if you get 2 successes, it would go to the air and then to the airport. And then once it is delivered all the victims, you can move it back to the helicopter space for free. But this is the new card that will kind of control where that helicopter is. In addition to that, on the terror cards for this set, you'll notice that all of them have a helicopter icon on it, and that's the icon that tells you to move it up 1 space. So even if you're not getting that card, the game will kind of help you and move that helicopter along. What you'll also notice on these terror cards are these little kind of thermometers with this little blue coldness on them. And what that means is that whenever you end a turn on any of the outdoor spaces, right, these kind of like out in the open areas, you are forced to take one of these frostbite tokens. And so this frostbite token does nothing the turn you acquire it. In a future turn, when you would take another frostbite token, instead you take 1 damage. And so that's going to apply to victims, that's going to apply to the killer, that's going to apply to the final girl. So be careful with victims. If they're hanging out here for too long, that could be an easy way to get them killed. And once you move into an indoor space, that's when you're able to remove that frostbite token, right, you've warmed up. Another interesting kind of change, and it makes sense with the helicopter on this map, is that when you set up the game on this map, you also start with the 2-way radio card. And this is a pretty simple card, but really useful. So you can see it has 4 charges, and then you could spend a charge to move a victim 1 space at the cost of time. May not be used on the same victim more than on a single turn. And so it's a nice way to manage victims getting to this helicopter. It can be a little awkward, right, because you can only carry 2 victims. So it can be awkward to get 3 on here. So if you're carrying 2, you can kind of have the 3rd one using that radio guiding them there. And so the vehicle on here, this is kind of reminiscent of the superloader that we saw on the USS Konrad. And so this starts on the map at the beginning of the game. You can either choose to put it next to the tool shed or next to the commander's hut. And then in that item deck, you're going to be able to search for the ski dozer cards. And what this does is either lets you get free movement to any of the outdoor spaces, or it allows you to actually place this hole token on any of the labs. So you're able to kind of burst down a hole and make a new path. And as we'll see in a moment, it complements the Organism, the killer for this set, quite well. So let's go ahead and take a look at that. So here we have the setup for the Organism, and here I have it set up on station 2891, just for the sake of an example here. It's a little easier to explain how they work. Because I would say, since the Poltergeist, this is probably the killer that just fundamentally changes the way you play, because it is so much wildly different than the other killers. So first, there's the main idea is that there's these potentially infected, assimilated people hiding among the victims. So when you actually set up the game, you're going to follow the setup card, and then randomly you're going to replace 3 victims with 3 of these exposed people. So these are people who potentially could be infected. And so here, first for the sake of example, I just put 3 out, and these 3 are going to be considered, exposed people. So they work a little special than regular victims, right? Killer does spawn, they cannot be attacked by the killer. You can't save these guys. They can't be replaced. So if you have like one of the white, blue, or orange meeples, you can't choose to take one of these guys off. They're always going to be panicking after the killer phase. So regardless if someone was killed and the killer's in their spot, they're always running around panicking, presumably because they're worried they're exposed. Very understandable. And then if they are killed, you are going to reveal their test result. We're going to get to the test results in just a second. In addition to the setup, you're going to have your traditional kind of item decks, and then above each of the item decks, there could be 3, sometimes 4, depending on the location. You're going to put one of these test kits. And so that gets to the kind of main mechanic of how you actually reveal the killer. And you can see the test kit, when you search an item, you can choose to take the corresponding test kit for free. So you can have up to 3 test kits because there's 3 infected people. So you can discard this card to test one of the exposed victims in your space to see if it's been assimilated. And so that's one way to test. It's a free action. You just discard this and then you would test them. Or if you notice on the station 2891, this is why I said it's so integrated to this killer, is that there's a lab space here. So you can also do a free action if you're with one of the infected people in a lab space and test them. And you might be wondering, hey, there's no other lab space in the other locations. Luckily, it also comes with a little lab token. So in other maps that don't have a lab, of course, when you're doing the setup, since you're not placing a killer on this map, where the killer would normally spawn is where the lab will go. So that still gives you the test kit and the lab location to test for victims. So regardless of the map you're playing, it still works out pretty well as far as the whole assimilated system. The actual way the testing works is that at the beginning of the game, you're going to shuffle up this test results deck. And after you successfully do a test, you're going to reveal the top card. And so it could do one of 2 things. It could either be safe. You can see replace the exposed victim with a normal victim, then remove this card from the game. So you would remove that, and then you would have to do another test. Future, right? You just have 2 turns, 2 tests rather. Oh, look, that one's safe. That's pretty lucky. And then, we can guess what the last one is. So that is assimilated here. And that's when you reveal the mutated organism and apply the bloodlust effects from the bottom of the current bloodlust level. Shuffle this test result back. So you can get really unlucky, and you could potentially reveal the assimilated as your first test, shuffle it again, reveal another assimilated, and you could have up to 3 assimilated people, which would lead to having 3 killers. So what actually happens when you reveal someone who is assimilated? So at that point is when you're going to reveal one of these mutated organisms. So at the start of the game, we set out these 3 potential killer cards, and you reveal the rightmost one, and that's going to reveal which of the 3 organisms is going to spawn in that location. And you can see here you have the matching actual killer cards here, so we'll take our matching one. You'll place it here, and this is where you're going to see your kind of traditional killer board that you might be used to. So let's say, for example, we test the gray meeple here, and it's assimilated. You immediately would place the corresponding killer organism there. If the bloodlust track had risen before this was revealed, you immediately resolve any revealed bloodlust effects. You can see these are a bit shorter tracks, and another thing you're going to notice is that the finale is kind of built into this card just by the nature of the way these are set up. There's no real good way to show a finale for all of them. So you can see there's still finale cards, you'll still reveal it, but it doesn't have that unique killer action. So when you would have the finale card revealed, you'll do the killer action and then you do the finale action. And that's kind of how that works when you get towards the end of the game. So at most you can have 3, but best case scenario, you'll just have 1. And these would all have their own individual health pools, their own health icons. And then when you're actually resolving the actions, if multiple of them were revealed, you just go left to right and then you do all of those actions. So again, this kind of builds upon a lot of the intruder kind of mechanism, I thought, with the kind of multiple killers, the way they're replaced. It's very interesting. It's probably the most complex, maybe since like the Sacred Grove Inkinyaba of Series 1, but I think it's a really interesting, good implementation. Again, this felt really inspired, and someone had a love for the thing. AJ Porfirio, who had designed this set, you could just tell there's a love for this, and the way it's adapted, I think, is really quite nice. And it really changes the main mechanic, main formula, kind of game loop that you do in Final Girl, and I think it is all the better for that. I think this is a great, if you're kind of used to the standard killer set, I think this is a really cool change to that normal formula. So let's take a quick look at the Final Girls that are part of this set, or 2 kind of Arctic researchers. And so here we have Kate, and you could see she starts with a maximum health of 4, and her ability will set her maximum health to 7, and you immediately recover all health. And then while at full health, you roll +1 horror rolls. This is interesting because a lot of the time when I'm playing, I'll almost go down to 1 health with like a protection card so I can get the extra roll. So it's cool that Kate is able to change that a little bit and actually encourages you to do more healing, because sometimes I'll kind of let that go just so I can get the extra roll. I'd rather have be playing a little risky, but it's cool that she changes that quite a bit. In here we have Yuki, and so hers is once per turn you may play a copy of Guard as though it was in your hand. So again, both of these really playing into the kind of like survivalist mindset. You're right, surviving in this Arctic kind of wasteland. I think they're both really well suited for this set, and I both really like them, both good Final Girls. And so again, I would say that the Organism and the station here, they're kind of married so perfectly. A really good package. I think it's more on the complex side, but the feeling of being isolated on the station, right? The helicopter being the only way out, it really feels like you are trapped here with this organism, and it kind of gets that sense of isolation and paranoia that the thing kind of inspires. I think is translated pretty well into the board here. But overall, I think a really good, cool adaptation of the thing here. Whew, that was an exhausting run through of all 5 of those feature films, but we saw a lot of cool stuff there. So you might be wondering, what order should I get these? Come to your own conclusions based on your interest level, but let me give you my 2 cents as far as where I would start if I was totally new to the game, or if I had some of Series 1, kind of the order I would personally go with. Now, let's say you totally are not into Series 1, you wanted to get right into the latest thing. I think that The Big Bad Wolf and Storybook Woods is the definite beginner-friendly one, to the point where even if you didn't want to get Camp Happy Trails and you're not really interested in the summer camp and the Wolf is more interesting to you, I think this is an excellent beginner entry point. Even for people who are already familiar with the game, I think the Big Bad Wolf scales very well. It's still challenging, but still it gives you a little bit of time to scale up and get used to the game while he's in the hunting mode. Storybook Woods is kind of middle of the pack, not too special of a location in my opinion. It was cool. I like how claustrophobic it is, but it doesn't it doesn't stand out for me personally. But in the Big Bad Wolf, definite winner there. Now the next 2 complement someone who has a couple of existing boxes already. I think they would offer some cool replayability and some cool options. First, let's talk about the Intruders and the Wingard Cottage. Now the Intruders, I think, are an amazing implementation of multiple killers. This is a challenging thing to approach. We had minions in Series 1, but this is the first attempt to have proper killers who are going after you that aren't just, 1 health minions. And I think the Intruders are a very fun set of killers. I think they can be adapted to a lot of the different maps to very interesting results. And personally, I'm just a fan of that home intruder. It doesn't feel supernatural, right? It feels a little bit real and gritty. And I think that the Intruders are very good if you're into that. Wingard Cottage, I think, is a standout location. The setting of a lakefront cabin, I liked having a kind of indoor area that you can kind of trap and kind of hunker down in and fight in, and you have the nice crafting system. I think that's implemented very well. Again, it leads to that survival horror feeling where you just have, everyday items to make cool weapons, and I think that does this very well. This one, really enjoy that. This is probably the one that hit the kind of softest for me. So we're gonna talk about the Ratchet Lady and Wolfe Asylum. So Wolfe Asylum, this is the positive for me. I think the pill system is absolutely wild. I think the amped cards add a really cool layer of just kind of over-the-top action-y type thing that's not really present in Final Girl, right? The Final Girl 2.0 card where you get to pull another Final Girl out to help you. That's really cool. I like the pill system, it's fun. I think it smooths out difficulty a little bit. Good if you want a little bit of an easier curve. Now the Ratchet Lady, I struggle about my feelings with her. I think the idea of a scaling hero, a scaling killer is very cool. The idea that she's just gonna keep getting stronger and stronger unless you take her on is pretty cool. I think the inmate asylum stuff is interesting. It felt a little, this game's already swingy, right, just by the nature of it having dice, but I noticed that depending on how many maniacs are going around the board, the Ratchet Lady can feel either really easy to take on or really, really challenging to take on. I don't know, almost similar to how I feel about the Poltergeist, where you can either get really lucky and get those items to beat her really quickly, or she's just gonna decimate you, and that's kind of how I feel about the Ratchet Lady. Now the next two are probably the ones I have to imagine in terms of popularity, just because these two are so iconic and recognizable. I think these two are my personal standouts for this set. Let's start with the Evomorph and the USS Konrad, right? Our alien, right? There's a lot of expectations if you're going to take on such an iconic character and setting to do it right. And I think this knocks it out of the park. The USS Konrad, the key card system, it feels like you're kind of crawling and scraping by and trying to improvise things on the ship to fight this killer. You get a little Jason X-y when you have like Hans in space or something, but especially when it's married with the Xenomorph or the Evomorph, gonna make that slip all the time. I think it just works beautifully, and it's a very cool map. I think again, the key cards, being able to self-destruct the ship, being able to have airlocks to kill get rid of the killer, being able to use the furnace. I like that this map really offers a lot of alternate win conditions that aren't necessarily present in a lot of the other maps. Really, it's you having to get an item to kill most of the time, and I think that having the map almost be an additional item for you, getting the key cards and then using those almost as weapons and improvising is really, really good. I love the USS Konrad, solid map. Now the Evomorph. Now the Evomorph, it's kind of similar in a way to how I feel about the Big Bad Wolf, where the Evomorph starts as a pretty manageable hatchling, and then by the time he gets to an adult, you better be ready to take it on. Now, I think the evolving mechanic works really well. The amount of time it takes to kind of get from the hatchling up to an adult feels appropriate. I think the scanning, so that whole, oh my goodness. Well, before I get to the scanning, let me talk about the ambushing and kind of hiding mechanic. I think that's beautiful. I absolutely love that feeling where the killer can pop out at any moment. You're not necessarily ready for it. And I can't wait to see what they do with that mechanic with some other possible killers. I think the idea of, being stalked and things jumping out at you is really, really cool, and it adds a nice layer of tension to the game. Where do I think that next ambush card is just going to maybe raise the terror level, or am I going to be taking multiple attacks in the next turn? You just don't quite know, and it raises that tension so well. I think the unique scan card is pretty cool, being able to play against that ambush, right? Being proactive and saying, hey, you're not gonna be able to jump out at me. I know I can kind of approximate where you're gonna come from. And I think that just works so well. I think they did a beautiful job at really capturing the feeling of almost the first Alien. Less actiony, maybe more a little survival horror where you are stuck on this ship with the alien and just trying to get by. And this is probably what I would say is the most advanced of the five. The Evomorph is pretty advanced too, but I think that the Organism probably has the most overhead and upkeep out of all of them, but I think it's to a good result. I think having 3 potential killers, having to do the test kits, having to manage if you want to stay next to these people and escort to them lab, or you're going to risk having the killer right next to you. Having the 3 different killers with 3 stats is pretty cool. Adds a nice amount of replayability. I will say, if you get unlucky enough to get 3 organisms, I think you're pretty much toast. Because these aren't even like the Intruders where it felt designed to fight all 3 of them. If you're fighting all 3 of the organisms, you're in for a tough, tough time. Good luck to you if that happens. Now, Station 2891, I think, is a pretty cool map, and similar to the USS Konrad and the Evomorph, I feel like these two are married so beautifully to each other. I think having a single escape point with the helicopter, having to wait to get the victims to safety, not being able just to spam, okay, I'm gonna rush all the victims, get my ultimate ability, and go, right? You are forced to do this slow slog of tension and waiting for that helicopter. Oh, is the helicopter gonna make it? It takes time. And it is very good. You feel, it captures that feeling of being isolated in a research station in the Arctic, similar to The Thing, very well. And I think the two of them, right, they pay this direct homage to these movies and these classic horror movies, and I think they both do a good job at capturing what is so recognizable about them into a board game. And I love it. I love The Thing and the Organism, really, really solid. So as a quick recap, I would say if you're totally new to the franchise and you want something a little beginner friendlier, go with the Big Bad Wolf. I think your intermediate options are the Intruders and the Ratchet Lady. And I think in terms if you want something with a little bit more complexity, I think the Evomorph and the Organism are your two choices. But I think all 5 of them are very, very solid new additions. I think they build upon mechanics in Series 1 in very interesting ways. I like that there's some new guest designers on this. I'm really excited to see if that keeps branching out. I think there's a beautiful foundation here. Obviously, I'm a huge fan of the Final Girl series, so I was really pleased to see that Series 2 really just feels like it elevates the entire series. So hopefully this video was helpful for you if you're starting to get into it, kind of guiding which ones you might want to get. Please let me know below if you have any questions about any of the settings or the killers, or you want any recommendations. Please do let me know. If you guys want to see more content, I still have the rest of the Series 2 box here. We still have the kind of desperation dice. We have the From the Grave, the zombie stuff that I haven't had a chance to play yet, and a whole bunch of other stuff. So if you want more Final Girl content, be sure to leave a comment below and let me know what you want to see. I'm really excited to keep playing it. All of these, I tried to play at least 2 games with each of the Final Girls just to get a feel for their abilities, but I haven't had a chance to really sink my teeth into mixing and matching, especially the Series 1 and the Series 2 stuff. I could spend pretty much the whole year playing nothing but Final Girl, and I look forward to doing a good amount of that throughout the year. Again, thank you guys for watching. I hope this video was helpful for you, and I'll see you on the next one. Thanks for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, consider giving it a thumbs up and subscribing for more videos like this. I also have a Twitter and Instagram where I post thoughts and photos of games I'm playing throughout the week, and I hope to see you there. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you next time.